Hi, everybody. I see very familiar faces here. It's so nice to see you all.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Feel free to mic up and show your face and, let's have a conversation. Nice to see you, Susan and Chris and
Hey, everybody.
Wayne and Tracy and everybody. Hi. Do we want to do a quick round of introductions or are we ready to get right to this tool and talk about where we're at here? I'm going to show it on my screen.
I wouldn't mind, Karen, just hearing who all we have here.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
That's great. Tracy, why don't you get started? We'll do a little speed round.
Sure. My name is Tracy Pernhage. I work for the state of Michigan, Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and I'm a recycling specialist.
Thank you. How about Wayne?
Wayne Jurdy, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, Recycling Market Development.
Thank you. How about Kelly Shelter?
Yeah, Kelly Shelter, Michigan Recycling Coalition.
Thank you. Julie Schliff.
Okay, Julie, EPA Region 5. I am in Susan Rooney's section. I work with Chris and I work on Subtitle D, SMM, and Sustainable Management of Food.
Excellent. Chris.
Hey, it's Chris Newman, EPA Region 5 as well, working on recycling market development topics as well. And I got a quick question for Wayne. Is that popcorn harvest time out there in the background?
I'm working on it. Yes. It's snowing as we speak, though. I still have some popcorn to pick, though. That's still on the cob. So yes.
That's great. All right, Susan Mooney.
Hi, Susan Mooney. I'm with EPA Region 5.
Glad to have you. Susan Heffron.
Susan Heffron. I work at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency with Wayne and Recycling Market Development.
That's great. Jennifer Semro.
Morning, I'm Jennifer Sumro. I'm the Waste Reduction and Diversion Coordinator for the Wisconsin DNR.
Thank you. Kate Hirons.
Good morning, I'm Kate Strum-Hirons. I'm also with the Wisconsin DNR, the Recycling and Solid Waste Section Chief.
Excellent. Susan Vescovi.
I'm Susan Vescovi, EPA Region 5. I cannot believe we have like absolutely every Susan in all of Region 5 on this in this one room.
Lucky us.
What luck.
What about Eliza?
Hi, my name is Eliza Krasinski. I'm also from Wisconsin DNR and I'm a recycling specialist.
That's great. Glad you're here. And Steve, you want to end us up?
Sure. Steve Montel. I've been with RS for about 10 years. My normal book of work is a lot of work on packaging access nationally, but I'm based out of Tuscola County, Genesee County, Michigan. And so I get wrapped up in a lot of Michigan and then Region 5 stuff because I'm here.
That's great. Well, thanks. That was fun. I'm glad you all are here. So are you seeing my screen? Yes. Okay, great. I wanted to just give you a chance to look at this kind of in a more thorough way and to ask, get your question answered about what this thing is. Our intention is that we will have a training that will get down into the nitty-gritty about what this tool can do and be used for, but we wanted to introduce it to you so that we can generate interest and enthusiasm and bring more people to the table who can potentially learn and use this tool. So this is basically the instructions tab. And then the input tab is really based on those kind of 15 questions. And depending on, what you want to accomplish today, we can either try this out or maybe have a more theoretical discussion about, how you see this being used in your state. Anybody have a preference?
I want to know if we can use it at the conference.
Wouldn't that be great? That is definitely in the plans.
Karen, I was just curious if you had an example of how it was used maybe in Region 4.
We plan on providing an example about how it's been used in Region 4 at our next event in June with this group, so that you can actually see how it's been applied and used. This particular meeting is really about getting from you what you think is here and valuable, and what you think may be missing from this, and what we might think about adding to the tool, or thinking about so it can be valuable and applied locally. As I think Marty indicated, they really tried to streamline kind of this input mask and model to make it really easy for any community to put information in, to get information out about really the best way services can be provided, or maybe not the best way services can be provided, but how they all stack up as far as the costs and implications, infrastructure implications, staff implications, service implications.
So this is Jennifer from Wisconsin. So, I mean, just sort of being introduced to this, I almost feel like I would want to play with it a bit to see what I think might need to be enhanced, kind of thing. But if I understood the intro presentation, I think that it was said that materials could be selected, like what you wanted to collect from traditional curbside materials. Did I understand that correctly?
That's a really good question, and maybe I'll leave that one up for Steve.
Yeah, and when we talk about, let's go down here. Yeah, so specifically, we're assuming a pretty wide basket of goods going into your recycling. We did deal with glass separately. You get the benefit of glass separately because in the South, where they have a lot of paper mills, glass and paper are constantly at war with each other. And so a lot of systems down there, or I shouldn't say a lot of them are either taking glass out of their system, or they're proposing, if they have really good systems, to run a dual stream, like a glass and then everything else. So we're assuming a pretty standard basket of goods, whether you accept number 7 plastic or not, or whatever, it doesn't really impact the overall model as much as something like glass that would be like, I don't know, maybe 40% of your volume or your tonnage. So glass is the big one weight wise that comes out. And then, just within our region, there are things like, obviously aluminum is included on every program. But Ohio gets a lot more aluminum than Michigan does, right? So there are some variations within the region right there that are you have to take them at a state level. You can't tackle them full regional level. So state like Michigan, we have very little aluminum. State like Ohio, all those guys at Ohio State are loading up their recyclables hopefully every week with their beer cans. So different states, different situations.
Sure. Yeah, I think Wisconsin might be, tied with our beer can and glass bottle consumption, but I'm not sure. But I guess one thing that might make it more useful for Wisconsin, if we were to disseminate this to our communities, because we have certain materials that are banned from landfill disposal, by state law, so they wouldn't have the ability to opt out of, say, glass. If the model does allow for, like you say, collecting glass separately, that would be something that a community in Wisconsin could consider, but they're legally obligated to collect glass. So, for us, we'd want to make sure that if we promoted the tool, we either made that clear, that they can't use glass optional, or if, like I say, glass was presented as either combined with single stream or collected separately, that would be sort of the approach we would need to take.
Yeah, Jen, so go ahead, Steve, sorry.
Is that I'm assuming that's an instructions based issue, right? So we'd want to explicitly call out hey, Wisconsin, you can't take your glass out, so make sure you include it. Because we don't want to get ourselves in a situation where we have 5 separate tools. We want to get ourselves in a situation where we have one tool with, as we select states, it would be kind of like your landfill tip fee, right? It's particular to your state. Based on taxes and everything else. So I think that's an instructional issue that we have to make sure we call out.
I have a couple questions. Sorry, Jennifer, did you have something else for Steve?
No, I'm done.
No, I didn't know if Jennifer was going to follow up.
I'll just let you all know that we are taking notes, Jennifer, and so we will get kind of specific about your question and either find a way to get back to you or address that in the next workshop that we have on this. Either instructional or underlying assumptions about what's happening in your state is how that will probably be addressed, and we'll get back to you. Go ahead, Tracy.
Karen, can you scroll down I wanted to see what the food waste options were. And this may be like really preemptive, right? I mean, is there?
Are you talking here or where did you see that? Maybe in
I guess like the organics, like the options for organics. And this may be like so it's seasonal organics collection with carts. I guess I'm just, and this is really probably like way preemptive because we're not there. And I'm just thinking like Michigan specific kind of stuff, like, you know, how, and because we're not there, right? We just, and you know, we just went through all those stakeholder meetings, right? But how do we, at what point can we start looking at what the options are for building in specific organics collection, not seasonally, if that makes sense, options?
Yeah, that's, I think, a good point. We'll take a note on. It may be something that needs to be added because frankly, food waste is being produced throughout the year. And as we get serious about managing that material specifically, we've got to we've got to figure that in. So
right.
that's a good
and
point.
I mean, we do have, I mean, a few programs, right, that are doing that all year long. And I mean, you know, the idea is that we move to that all year long, right? So I guess I'm not sure why it's just a seasonal, I mean, unless we're just talking about it being yard waste, right? But I guess in my mind, you know, we'd want to look at something with food waste. So that's, I guess that's one comment. And this kind of goes back to what Steve just made a comment about is what is the potential for this to be a state-specific tool? And maybe that's a topic, maybe that's a conversation that we need to have offline, you know, with Michigan people, right?
Yeah,
just because there are so many variables between states, right? I mean, Jennifer just alluded to that just with, you know, what they have going on in Wisconsin. And so, I mean, there are so many variables between states that, you know, what would it take to just have this Michigan specific or Wisconsin specific or whatever that is, right? And I mean, obviously I'm thinking, you know, Michigan specific. So that's the second thing. And then Matt just texted me during the first part and said, Elizabeth would love to see this. So
too bad for Elizabeth.
Right. Yeah. So
yeah,
anyway, but so, yeah, I mean, those are two, I guess those two things is, you know, what would it take to be state-specific tool, a state-specific tool, and then the food waste part of it.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that kind of state-specific tool a little bit later in the presentation because, frankly, we do want, you know, states to figure out how this is most useful to them, and if there's some adaptation that needs to happen, then state funding is going to be required to make those adaptations. As long as the state has a plan to, you know, spread it far and wide and use it.
Right.
So thanks, Tracy. Wayne, you said something here. Are residuals taken into account in the cost of processing? And I think that's a really interesting question, but I don't know. Steve, do you have any answer to that?
Yeah, the residuals would be dealt with as part of the overall cost of processing.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking that there's such a difference. In Minnesota, we're about 8 to 9%, but in other states, it could be much higher, or I don't think it's much lower, but it could be higher. So obviously, then you got to throw away those residuals, which would increase your cost.
Yeah.
For some reason in Wisconsin, they get an abundance of bowling balls in their residuals.
Well, we get a few of those too in Minnesota. Yes.
That's great. And so that's another thing to keep in mind with the underlying assumptions by state in the region. So that's awesome. What else? Any other observations here? besides the important bowling ball observation. Go
I
ahead,
have
Wayne.
another, if you don't know your cost, are there ranges that you can pick to fill your categories?
Yeah, for almost every category, there's a default. And if you take the default, that's going to take you to like an average number.
Yeah.
So if you were to pick the default on every question, it's going to give you like the world's most generic Region 5 program, which is probably not that far off.
Yeah.
But, the more specific you get, it starts to then give you those directionals at the end, right?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and just to kind of remind us, this input table, these 15 questions are really fairly basic, and they start to get at, Jennifer, the question you were asking about glass, because will glass be included in single stream recycling? So yes, no, that depends, that has a different outcome whatever way you go. Do you know your tip fees? If you do, that says something. Do you know your recycling processing fee? That's important and can be added. If not, they've got that for you too. How far are your transfer station, MRF, and other destinations to direct haul this material? Of course, transportation has impact. So some really, I think, fairly basic information can spit out something very specific. And one of the things I was interested in is really recycling drop-off centers, and I'd like to see this enhanced a little bit. But there's definitely hub and spoke networking situations that would likely include MRFs, and so those are integrated systems as well. But more than half of Michigan is covered by subscription-based, rural services that are going to be provided through, a drop-off scenario. So really getting clear about, what can be provided through a drop-off program is important. Eliza, is there a list of definitions included with this tool? I think that could help smaller communities, most definitely. And there are some definitions here, and you can see those at the bottom of all of these. Our intent, I know we're leaving soon, our intent here is to show you all this, to get your feedback so we can go back and make adjustments. And then at the next time we get together, we may be able to hand it to you to actually play with and move forward. But the team will be talking about how we make that all happen here really soon.
I just want to say really quickly that some of, obviously not everyone's program fits into those options of, not necessarily the drop-off site, but, curbside collection with carts every week, bi-weekly, that kind of thing. There's still variations with that. So, just take that into consideration that not every.
That's great. Thanks. Well, we had some good discussion in our room. And I'm sure Marty is going to share what they've learned in their rooms. But, I'll just share that, we had some discussion around the way that each state is very different. I mean, there's really different assumptions that need to be made for each state. And I believe this model includes some of those assumptions, but our group went a little bit deeper, and we took some notes to check on some of those assumptions. We also talked about the fact that this model could be even more finely adapted to each state. If the state is willing to put some funding into expanding this model or enhancing this model for state specific kind of purposes, to make it easier, to make those underlying assumptions more clear and numerous, that can be available there as well. Tracy Pernage really brought up an interesting question is, when are we going to move on from just seasonal organics collection? When can we start talking about how that gets provided in a more year round kind of way, because that is, you know, food waste is generated year round, but we've got a little ways to go to get there. If anybody wants to pipe up and add anything from our conversation, you're welcome to do that. Steve, do you have anything that you want to add from that discussion?
I just think we need to go through the instructions, make sure that, if there are things that are, pretty divergent for a particular state, that we include those in the instructions, as people are working through this. Wisconsin with their required material list is the one that came up. And, that's one that we, if you're in Wisconsin, you're planning a program, you really can't take glass out. And we just need to make that clear in some of the instructions there. So it limits the options.
Karen, can we talk like just for 30 more seconds about the year-round organics potential?
Sure.
For that, I guess I feel like, at least in Michigan, we don't have a lot of that happening, but we do have some of it. And as as part of our recycling infrastructure grants, we are funding some of that either as permanent programs or as pilot programs. So I guess in my thinking, I feel like if it's not something that we see like in this tool, that I guess it's just an opportunity to be a little bit more forward thinking, right? Yeah. And to see that as an opportunity when communities are looking at and using this tool, that they see that as like, oh, that's the next step for us,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that's all.
Yep.
So.
Agreed. We do want to forge the path for sure.
Right.
For sure.
Yep.
Well, Karen, if I could, fine tuning that compost piece is one that, or that organics one is one that I think is going to require that, because again, remembering who the client is. I'll say one of my debriefs was great, is that all of my state members said, we can't do this. We need to deliver this to the locals. And I was like, right, that's exactly what Region 4 said, is that we need to really get this, into the local levels. The other modules that they were looking at, again, back to that small city and maybe the multifamily are ones that have been identified previously. And when we look at that clientele, that's not the big cities, not the high performers. It's all those folks who have no programs at all, who are likely to start with a drop off or curbside, not with a full scale organics program, et cetera. So the organics one, I think, is new, it's different. And to your point, Tracy, what's going to be the highest utility around that one? And I think that's open to where that needs to go. Maybe that needs to be less focused on small communities and more focused on, that cadre of people who are likely to want to adapt it. I think we're very open, to all those pieces. The other piece I'll just, again, concur, Karen, is this: how do we localize it? And how do we, recognize that that's there? I think for the base model, we've done that in terms of being statewide, but you identified the data components that can also be adjusted. But part of the Region 4 process was, boy, there's a lot of work that can be done state by state to support the budget component, which says, what are my funding mechanisms? I use a DPW district. I have they have these different districts. I have a different thing. I have a plan in Wisconsin. And so there's a lot of elements that it's maybe not the tool that should not be overused, right? It's directional, et cetera. It's not it, but there's other ways to make sure that when we're training folks up on how to be financially, confident and really arguing for the programs, make sure they know what their state, workarounds are, what their state grant programs are, et cetera. So there's places to improve it in other areas too that might answer the same question in terms of its utility. I just really encourage people to give us any feedback like that, Karen, but I will say we should pretty much assume that we are going to have a technical session. I think there's enough people who want to just, hey, Holly, you're going to spend an hour, we're going to walk through it and do that. And so I don't know that we need to do that with this whole group, but certainly we could get a group that's self-selected and make sure that we offer that to folks, sooner than later. And if the compost discussion is a part of that, that's probably okay too.
Marty, do you want to talk?
I was just going to say, would it be all right if Holly just walks through that drop down to show what the variations in the organics programs are? I think that was the bulk of the questions in our group is what are the options that are being considered?
So the options that are considered are the type of compost technology, whether it's windrow or aerated static pile, and then whether or not you're processing yard waste only or yard waste as well as food waste. Those are pretty much the only options. Everything else is set with the collection being seasonal, 8 months out of the year. Are there more options that you're thinking would be useful?
Well, the question was, so with food waste, obviously you switch to a 12-month calendar instead of an 8-month calendar, and your volumes just align to those months.
So it's still seasonal.
Okay.
It's still
so there's
seasonal,
no
even if it
12
is food waste included.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, we'll have to talk about that in the future as we work together as a team. Marty, did you have any findings or debrief from the work in your group? What was your discussion about?
I really, like I said, I really think it really just mimicked a lot of what you had to say. You know, the first feedback was, this is really great. It's really on point. That's a lot of our issues. How do we get the locals to use it? Right. And should we beef some of those up? This notion of, I really believe this will be true, is that the small city university multifamily, that's going to be a question for a lot of people, and I think will really improve the utility of the tool altogether. And it's got that for a lot of regions that are maybe not super rural like the South is, but are pretty rural, but have small cities. So that came up. And then again, there's these notions about we're all local. How do we beef up the understanding, maybe not just with the tool, but also with those other understandings that are available through the budget and all that. And then I think the other piece that we talked about a little bit was, very explicit, this is SROs, the recycling organizations is the state, this is economic development entities, this is privates, and that when you're thinking about who to invite, who to include, how to deliver this, through your state, make sure you're including all those folks and sharing that information back with us. So I think that's the kind of the quick summation. And again, I'd offer anyone else in our group to speak up. We heard from Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois.
That's great. I think we're getting really close to kind of wrapping this session up. We're going to give you back some time today. So, we're still kind of, developing these ideas, or how we're going to bring more people into the fold over the next, couple months. But our intention is to hold another session very much like this, where we talk a little bit more, get a little bit further down the road in some of the questions that you all brought up. But what we really need is for you all to, identify other kind of recycling leaders in your state, not just state level leaders, but local and regional leaders that really understand and could easily see the value of this tool, to come to the session in June to learn about this tool, so that they can also attract people to the training that we're planning in September. So we really want to build the momentum for this training in September, where we're ready to hand off this tool for people to actually use and apply. Part of that training is going to be like, maybe about how you're making a presentation, at least providing examples as to how others have done that. So what I encourage you to do, a couple of things I encourage you to do is, once you get those invitations from us, you'll probably get an invite to register for the June. Please share that with those people you think may be helpful. And then also encourage you to speak with your state level leaders to explore ways that your state can support the dissemination and use of this tool. If there's a value in you using this tool or clarifying this tool, making it more specific to your state, that's something that you can certainly talk about with RRS, but how can you use this in your state? In Michigan, we have a unique relationship with our state agency, the Michigan Recycling Coalition. We are the state recycling organization. We have unique relationship with all of these people, and part of the ways I intend to use it is engaging people on the ground and introducing this tool to them specifically, maybe even walking through this tool with whatever numbers and information they have to help them figure out where they sit in this logistical system of service provision, and help them find their way using this tool. So we hope that you'll join us in June and again in September for the big system. And I guess I'll ask Marty if he's got anything to add before we let you all go. And thank you for being here today.
I think I'm great. I think it was good to see everybody. And I would just add that we'll be reaching out in terms of some technical feedback, and it might be a different group that you think of, because we want all your techie people that know your data, know your spreadsheets, and want to talk to our people who know the same. But that'll be part of the follow up. But thanks again to everyone, and really great participation in my group at least. So I thank you for that as well.
Thank you. Thursday. Tomorrow is Friday.
Good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.